The gate had been chained shut for 6 years. Now 4 men stood in front of it, saying nothing. Baying the fence, 41 hives sat in even rows, humming steadily under an August sky that had turned every other pasture in the county the color of dust. Cattle grazed calm and glossy back nearby, untouched by the heat that had already killed 2 neighboring herds that summer. Dale Pruitt, who had kept bees for 31 years, took off his hat and did not put it back on. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. But to understand what they were seeing, you have to go back 14 months, to the day Caleb Whitfield did something everyone in the county said was a mistake. Sometimes the thing everyone laughs at is the only thing anyone was paying real attention to. Subscribe for more true stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Caleb was 16 when his father's tractor rolled on the slope behind their barn. What he left behind was 11 acres of hard red clay in Boone County, Kentucky, and $9,000 of unpaid equipment debt. His grandmother, Ruth Whitfield, moved in that winter. She had spent 32 years teaching high school biology before she retired, and she kept a shelf of field notebooks nobody in town ever asked to read. The land had once carried 40 head of cattle. Now it carried 4, and a boy who barely spoke since the funeral. One evening, sorting through his father's shed, Caleb found 6 rusted, abandoned beehive boxes stacked against the back wall, leftovers from a hobby his father never finished. Empty things don't stay empty forever, Ruth told him one night, half to herself, not if somebody's patient enough to look. She said it like it meant nothing. Caleb didn't answer. It just kept sanding the boxes. Ruth had read, decades earlier, about varroa-sensitive hygiene, a genetic trait first identified through USDA honeybee breeding programs in the 1990s. In which certain bees detect mite-infested brood cells and remove them before the mites can reproduce. It was real science, published and repeated in apiculture journals for years, but almost nobody in Boone County kept bees that way. Most local hives were treated with chemical strips and replaced yearly. Caleb didn't announce anything. It drove 2 hours to a breeder near Lexington and came back with 4 small mail-order queens bred specifically for that hygienic trait. It requeened the 6 old hives quietly, one at a time, in the evenings after chores. Dale Pruitt came by in June, boots dusty, hat pushed back. He looked over the boxes Caleb had scavenged and shook his head. Bees from dead hives don't come back strong, son, Dale said. You're wasting a summer. Caleb only nodded and kept working. By July, half the county was calling the Whitfield place Dead Hive Hill. Caleb never argued. He just checked his frames every 10 days, exactly as Ruth's old notebooks said to. In late July, Caleb pulled a frame from Hive 3 and found it packed edge to edge with capped brood, more than double what he'd started with. He didn't call anyone. He didn't post anything. He just sat down on an overturned bucket and stayed there a long while, watching bees move in and out of a box that 3 months earlier had been rusting in a shed. By the first week of August, Boone County was 11 weeks into a drought. Creeks that normally ran through October had gone dry by the 4th of July. Wildflower nectar flow, which usually lasted into September, had all but stopped by mid-July. 3 of Ruth's neighbors lost entire colonies to starvation within 2 weeks of each other. Then the bank letter came. The $9,000 from Caleb's father's equipment loan was now 4 months behind, and the notice gave the Whitfields until the end of September before foreclosure proceedings began. The pressure showed up everywhere at once. The truck's water pump failed in the middle of August, and Caleb spent 2 nights under it by flashlight instead of sleeping. A rumor moved through the feed store that the Whitfields were about to lose the land outright, and Caleb heard it secondhand from a boy at the gas station. Juanibe, the smallest of the 6, showed signs of robbing, other colonies attacking it for its dwindling stores. Late one night, checking hives by lantern light, Caleb sat down against a fence post and didn't move for a long time. He didn't say it out loud, but he wondered if Dale had been right all along, if he'd spent a summer he couldn't afford chasing something that was never going to hold. Ruth found him there. She didn't lecture him. She said only, trust the frames, not the fear, and went back inside. Through all of it, the requeened hives kept building comb, storing what little nectar remained from Caleb's evening feedings of sugar syrup, a standard documented practice for supporting colonies through dearth periods. While 3 neighboring apiaries collapsed that August, the 6 original hives, now grown to 14, held their numbers. Dale showed up unannounced on a Tuesday evening in September, without his head on straight, carrying a spare water pump belt in one hand. Heard your truck was down, he said. Had one in my shop. He looked past Caleb at the rows of hives, quiet for a moment. Didn't figure requeening old stock would hold through a drought like this. It surprised me too, Caleb said. Dale nodded once, set the belt on the tailgate, and helped him install it before dark. By late September, 3 neighbors who had once called the place Dead Hive Hill started stopping by on Saturday mornings, asking where Caleb had fed the bees and where he'd ordered the queens. One brought a notebook of his own. At the feed store, the conversation changed from what the Whitfield boy was wasting his summer on to where a man could get a queen bred for mites instead of chemicals. What looked worthless from the road, 6 rusted boxes leaning against a shed wall, turned out to be waiting only for someone patient enough to look twice. It wasn't a rescue built on luck. It was requeening, feeding, and checking frames every 10 days for 14 months straight, done quietly by a boy nobody expected much from. Ruth's line about empty things never staying empty had meant nothing when she first said it. By September, it meant everything. If this reminded you that the thing everyone else has given up on might just be waiting for the right person to keep showing up, leave a comment below. Subscribe for more stories about people who were right before anyone else believed them.